Climate change is a result of the warming of the earth. And what has become clear is that this is a factor very much connected to human activity, especially to the type of industry and manufacturing, especially over the last 100 years, when we started using fossil fuels as a form of energy. With that, the Earth's temperature has warmed up significantly. We experience extreme temperatures. So extreme heat, as we've seen recently in places like Las Vegas, which had 117 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, you have heavy rainfall over a very short period. And we saw that, for example, in Vermont, and flooding in the past month in the US. We see it in the melting of ice at the poles and the rising of sea levels. So we are seeing it in all these respects. But along the Gulf of Guinea, what struck me was how people saw human intervention as central to how the environment was changing. They will point to sand winning and how sand winning had undermined or compromised the stability of their beaches. They will point to the dredging of the seashore and how that had deepened and increased the height of waves. They point to refuse and to plastics, and some stress the need for government to ban plastics and how this was choking and bringing refuse and litter, not only to their beaches, but to the lagoon that is connected all along the coast of the Gulf of Guinea. This human face of environmental change was important. Not that people were not aware that the climate is changing, but they saw perhaps more strongly this human hand or human intervention.
Well, what has surprised me in the last few weeks is that everybody we've met is aware of climate change and is aware of how the climate is impacting their lives and changing ways of life that have existed for generations. So in contrast to other parts of the world where I've been to, where people sometimes either deny that climate change exists or they don't feel it part of their everyday lives, I've been shocked at how much climate change is impacting on the day-to-day lives of the people that we've met.
Even without climate change, food security in Africa is threatened by low productivity in the farming sector. Now, climate change makes those problems worse because it pushes up heat, sometimes above the threshold that crops can tolerate, and it makes rainfall less predictable and less abundant in many places.
And it is imperative that humans find a way to slow down and even reduce our emission of gases so that the temperature returns to a level that is livable, or will create a lot of mess.
Oba manene mama chukobe 14 years bien ke kuma hayo nke jioni bien fete No ni mi kan di store ni nka yo ni e da wete. Ya ne mbe ko kamagu e na ngwo. No ababi e na to mo 2 weeks time na namba kwe. Ameka mi anamba da ne ofa ne wunyenye ba. Wo kanye baba ene wo. E abe shande mi. Fa ne ni fete. E so to mo store agbeni be ni wa na. Nshomba. Ne ba clake. Ne clake ni ke board chi se. Shagbene be na twatomo tu mi be ni wa na gla. Agbene bi ji nkumo. Woni bi efente wo mitaka woni bi fun no kono kokula. Woni ne she no kono. We balaka be san wo base ko amonoko e. Bike wo ba ya. Wo hin wo no kono momo.
Crisis we are facing is the crisis of improper definition of infrastructure, including reclamation exercise to support the geography of the coast.
As long as we continue to think about climate change from a top-down perspective, the answers that we find will continue to be unsatisfactory for the very people who are most affected by climate change.
And so with that, it becomes important that we look beyond hard or engineering solutions to natural or ecological solutions that communities can pursue themselves. Things like the growing of mangroves, the growing of coconuts, things to stabilize the seashore, sand filling to raise the height of the beach, things that communities can do. So I think that together with the indigenous ways with which they manage their coastline. When we went to Lekki, they pointed out how they had ponds which enabled them to absorb excess seawater and also to let it out at the appropriate time. All these indigenous methods seem to have been disrupted through human interventions. So to go back to some of these indigenous ways of managing their environment and to re-empower communities so that they are in the position to continue these practices.
One of the things we found is that there is no single solution to climate change. From Côte d'Ivoire all the way to the Delta, we have been speaking to fishing communities, we have been speaking to people affected by climate change, people for whom climate change is part of their lived reality. So we have observed how putting borders along communities that are facing challenges with regards to floods have in some ways helped to restrain these waters, but more fundamentally it has impacted negatively on communities very close to those places where mitigation efforts have been done. So hard effort to resolve issues like coastal erosion, issues like sea level rise are having huge impact on people on the margins of society. And so this is why it's important to have a comprehensive approach to resolving climate change. It appears to me that there is no sort of long-term comprehensive approach to resolving climate change. Instead, there is a sort of a rapid response, a reactionary response that ultimately does damage to the very people who are most affected by climate change.
Présentement, je suis à la vitesse de mais ce que je tiens à dire, c'est que depuis ma naissance, beaucoup de choses sont passées à Zotis. Surtout, à Zotis, c'est un village de pêcheurs. L'activité principale de ce village, c'est la pêche maritime. Et dans les années passées, la pêche était prospère. Il y avait du poisson. C'est ici les Français, le gouvernement français, la Zotis qui ravitaillait le gouvernement français en poisson. Tous les jours. Aujourd'hui, c'est telle pirogue, le lendemain, c'est telle pirogue. Tout le monde, vraiment à Zotis. De telle sorte que nos parents, même, pour mettre les enfants à l'école, c'était un problème. C'est un problème. Parce qu'il y a le poisson, vous ne voulez pas laisser les enfants aller à l'école. Moi, par exemple, c'est par l'intermédiaire de mon grand-père que aujourd'hui je suis ce que je suis. Sinon, nos parents pêcheurs là, il y avait du poisson. On avait des gens pour aller pêcher. Tu arrives sur la plage, il y a du poisson. Toute la Côte d'Ivoire même venait à Zoti pour se ravitailler en poisson. Mais aujourd'hui, il faut dire que les données ont changé. Plus rien. La mer a beaucoup avancé et aujourd'hui, plus rien. Aujourd'hui, les pêcheurs ne peuvent pas vivre de produire de la pêche. Parce qu'il n'y a rien. Il n'y a absolument rien. Et vraiment, c'est dommage. On n'avait pas pensé un instant qu'aujourd'hui, Adaptation allait devenir comme ça. Aujourd'hui, l'activité principale qui est la pêche, vraiment, a beaucoup baissé. À 90% s'il faut. De telle sorte que les parents même n'ont pas les moyens même de mettre leurs enfants même à l'école. Et c'est dommage. C'est dommage.
There are a number of measures that we need to do, which the world, the global scientific community has been able to come out with. Increasing our carbon sink by planting more trees that can trap the amount of CO2, carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere. When it comes to the city urban flooding, poor drainage, issues of improper waste disposal have tended to choke drains, and coupled with increasing urbanization, runoff water has increased into these drains and streams in our rivers in the cities. So with little rainfall, we have a lot of flash floods.
The phenomena we are seeing are not just West African phenomena, they are continental. What I call the rediscovery of the importance of beach property is a upper middle class phenomenon. We're seeing it everywhere. People want to have a beach view, and it's had consequences in the protection of areas considered valuable, in dredging and sand winning. During the Atlantic slave trade, the coastline was where economic activity was. Slaves were brought to the coast, ships came to the coast, merchants came to the coast. So it is almost as if people poured towards the coast. So slaving led to the density of coastal settlements. Colonial rule led to the establishment of capital cities along the coast. And the sort of disparate development, you see the capital city develop, you go 50 miles out of the capital city, it is like you've gone back 200-300 years. So if you wanted to go to a good school, you came to the coast. If you wanted medical treatment, you came to the coast. So the coast has been a recipient of population drift for some 3 centuries or more. So if you look at the West African countries which have a coastline, more than 40% of our population is concentrated along the coast. Where are they going to find land to build? So that we see people building on wetlands, that we see people building on floodplains. It is a result of the demographic predicament that we find ourselves in. Town planning has collapsed, as we saw from government, from country to country. So there's no enforcement of building regulations and codes, which further worsens the stability of the coastline, because you've cut the mangroves, you've built on the wetlands, the things that's supposed to stabilize the coast, because you need land to build.
There's a lot of human activities along the coast, and a proper environmental impact assessment needs to be conducted, in many cases to reduce or limit the negative impact of some of these developments on the coastline.
The climate change now is making the sea change more than as it is before. Because formerly, when we go to the sea, many fishes we catch, And then now the sea has overflown to the level that sometimes we can stay house for 3 days because of the waves. As the sea is big, the fishes all they will go up high seas. So that when we go, we cannot see them. That is affecting the fishing work in Olubedu.
Countries in Africa that have much smaller levels of greenhouse gas emissions, especially historically, but who are vulnerable to climate change impacts, should focus, in my view, more on adaptation than on mitigation.
I believe by now what we should be doing is that we should look for a way to safeguard what we have, irrespective of the quantity or the volume of carbon that is generated, because we have no control of what happens in the global north, but we have a control of what happens in our environment. As a result, I will be a little bit quiet on mitigation. I will be louder on adaptation for us to safeguard what we have right now, because it's a global thing. It's a biosphere. It's a huge ecosystem for everybody. So I will want us to defend our own patch of the globe, all right? Our own landscape here, from the impact of what is taking place globally, that we have no immediate control.
There are slums all over Africa. There are slums all over the world. There was a time that the government of Ghana, maybe more than a decade ago, wanted to evacuate people in a slum called Sodom and Gomorrah, proverbially. What I thought was a local incident became an international incident, because the slums of Sodom and Gomorrah have organized themselves and they are connected to NGOs. The international backlash that came for trying to evacuate people from, the government left them alone. So governments may not link up, but it is important that coastal communities find a way to link out. And I think the linking up, the intermediary, will be NGOs. And that would enable lessons learned somewhere be transferred to some other places. That would give them more of a voice. Because we saw fishing communities after fishing communities tell us they have no hope that government will come to their help. So how do we empower them? We empower them not in single communities, but finding ways to connect them to other communities, to connect them to NGOs, to connect them to international bodies, so that their predicament ceases to be a local predicament. It becomes a national, a regional, and an international predicament.
My name is Sheikh Traoré, and welcome in la plage du Lido, at Bridi Canal, dans la commune de Port-Boué. I grew up here, and I remember when I was young, we used to come and collect the shit. And now time flies, things have changed. And for more than 10 kilometers, they were having a hotel called Le Lido. This is what we call here La Plage du Lido. And the hotel today is underwater. And apart from that, most of the people, local community living near the sea, have moved because the water are very close to the road. And as I said, when I was kid, we were collecting shit on the shore. And today, there's no more shit, only plastic and waste. And we're doing our part to keep on maintaining our environment and for a sustainable future, we engage with youth on those matters.
Addressing issues of climate change is to be an activist. You cannot study climate change without being an activist. You cannot study climate change without engaging with the political. Because climate change necessarily operates in the realm of the political, in the realm of the social, in the realm of the cultural, the religious, the everyday. So if you come and you say you want to study climate change, you want to look at how local communities are adapting to climate change, you must realize that the everyday and the political are intimately connected. And so I emphasize again, to study climate change is to necessarily be an activist. There's nothing called pure climate change or pure climate science. It is embedded in the realm of the political.